Welcome to TradeTheNBA.com. This is John Sports for the 26th. And as we end the week, we're still below the ABM yellow, fighting it right here back and forth. The other day we dipped even further below the 61% line on the Morganacci here. And they brought it all the way back up later in the day and kind of hovering just right around the 76 at this particular stage. Not a real significant change from our DOC. We're still in fading long-term buyers, short-term buyers, also kind of weak within this setup. The midterm buyers are the ones that really jumped in to kind of like hold things where they're at. So not a whole lot of positives per se, but the most positive thing I guess you would argue would be price maintaining itself within this soft period, and it's kind of what I would describe as just being soft. From an NQ standpoint, identical. I mean, there's absolutely no change in it, but the NQ performing a little bit weaker in general. And of course, you can tell also by where we're at from a Morganacci standpoint. We've been well below the 50% here, below the 38. Now that becomes the turnaround point as well. Back and forth action. And we've had quite a bit. There was a pretty active day yesterday, and so we'll look at that on the 5K chart. But tremendous activity. So from the euro standpoint, of course, the euro starting its plunge, and this is a recognition that, even as I'm sitting here right now, you may not be able to hear it in the background because there's massive car honking and that they're doing huge protests because of the continued ridiculous nature of these lockdowns. Germany, they actually reversed their decision on just arbitrarily locking down for the holidays just to keep people from going anywhere. And had to reverse that because enough people protested. So that's about to happen here as well in Italy. Whether or not enough people will rise up, we're going to find out. But needless to say, the lack of activity is killing the euro from a growth standpoint. There's just no way around that. And gold's not catching anything because you've got some signs of inflation, but they're really not carrying through as long as you still have this muddled state issue as well, where some are operating normally and others are restricted. So it's problematic. And what we started, let me get rid of this real quick. There we go, remove that. That was just doing some of the testing within the adjustments to the MBI indicator and that, as well as within the DOC from a steel reset. And those dots represent different formations for me. But what we're really looking at for this MBI adjustment too is that in the key points, I mean, literally these points of where we have buys that may not necessarily have the strongest power, as well as at the peaks, either being too early or where we have long periods of up movement. And so the idea is just to get closer to where the change actually takes place so that there's just fewer drawdowns. That's really, it's about eliminating those drawdowns. I mean, accurately caught this run completely all the way down to the bottom. And the turnaround buy coming after the orange, and that was just a function of where this wasn't an overbought setup early on, even below the 23%. It needed a reset before achieving the new buy configuration, and we would look at that as a P2. So just subtle variations in how those signalings will be captured, particularly coming off of a short, those kinds of setups. And so as we moved all the way along through the day, where things really started to turn around was in the second half portion here of early afternoon. And what we ended up seeing was a series of topping patterns where we were starting to get much weaker signals over at the peaks with DOC spreads, but they weren't producing much of a decline because we were in these complete reset zones where anytime we have that white underneath the 10, you're in a nice continuation move. And then it's just a matter of the next setup just produced the next peak, and every time you came to what was a sell, you were dipping down into, fairly safe zones, only to pop back up. The final one here that took place was fairly decent and resulted in this nice setup. Same with the DOC. It was a perfect configuration from the buy standpoint, and then we ended up with cyan under red for quite some period. In fact, this was a huge run of the white into the 10 level, which just kept it pretty consistent. And what's nice about that is it takes away from the noise. We end up not jumping into shorts that won't do anything. In this particular case, there was something wrong with this DOC spread setup as it took place. You were just coming with the steel from a bottom reset, and as soon as the steel popped up, you're providing support all the way through it. And while those can still decay, it was just a matter of seeing the turnaround come through. And in fact, it looked pretty weak all the way until right here, where you had the white MBI line move below the red, and it's just it was the indication that we're going to get more upside. And we still had plenty of opportunity from back and forth. It's more or less just one of those break-even shorts, and then those happen. It's the same thing that happens with a failed long, that kind of concept. We did end up with positive extremes all the way through, so that was taking us back to here. We just filled the positive extremes actually just a moment ago. So it was only a few points difference between that high, that positive extreme right here, and where the previous algo levels were. So we've been pretty much mashing back and forth. In fact, I've deleted a bunch of the different lines just to make it a little cleaner, but even through the day, we have a series that take us all the way back to the 79 range, 38, 79 range. So can't hurt to have all those, marked for yourself, or at least to pay attention to them, because there's quite a few good ranges in between here that things start to break down. Definitely would represent where I would be looking at key spots. So as I continue to make adjustments with the point bars adapted to this, I will certainly send those out. Of course, we're going to have renewals for the indicators for April anyway, and so anything else will be added into that setup as well. But as always, though, I will update you with new and wonderful details as they become known. Trade well, and we will talk on Skype chat.